is, because there's so much transactional, brokerage, and it's usually calling, I say, the shipping manager, right? I think that, again, I was on that show yesterday, and I was talking, and he's a good dude, and nothing wrong with him. But from a business standpoint, like I was listening, and it was just like, yesterday I went with a cheaper carrier, and then, but it was like, do you think there needs to be business rules in place to where it's like, again, I don't want to say that they're not capable of making a decision, but you you think that it shouldn't be like, there needs to be some type of business rule, right, in place? Like, why are you choosing this carrier? Why are you doing it this way? Like, do you think that, like, from even like the warehouse is like, would you have, be a supply chain? Do you want to know what, are you putting business rules in place to your shipping managers, how they're booking their freight?
Yeah, I mean, so I think it should come kind of from the centralized supply chain, if you will. You want to have that governance in place, so you're not kind of, all over the board and people are making. I think the problem is you don't want people making independent decisions at different locations, or whatever it may be, where it doesn't kind of tie back into the corporate goal or mission or strategy. So you have a lot of people that are making these independent decisions versus kind of looking at the business as a whole. That's why I think it's important, like I said, to kind of do it from a centralized supply chain aspect, and then kind of roll that out and give guidance and governance on, what they should do at the, say, distribution level or plant level. I think it's more consistent there. It's more streamlined there. You can manage cost better. I think the same way kind of in purchasing, it should be more of a centralized function in terms of setting that governance in place. And then you work with the different distribution centers or plants to make sure that they understand and they're comfortable and everybody's basically kind of going by the same rules. So you do, again, make sure that you're doing the best thing for the organization, each team member, the supply chain, et cetera.
It's just crazy how it just, I get so excited about this stuff, but it like, just even talking about this, like how much really does go into, really having I mean, a scalable supply chain. Like, even just talking about that, it's like, multiple locations, and that, just everything. It's like, it's so much more. It's just, I could scream it, but it is so much more than just a rate, right? It's like, and I'm pretty heavy in the CPG industry, and I think that there's a huge gap when it comes into those medium, emerging brands where, they don't have the cost budget, they don't have the overhead. Maybe they're getting into those, big box retailers, and I have these discussions. It's a lot easier with them because it's like, it's the founder and maybe like 4 or 5 other people, right? They're just starting to scale, and it's, I always try to say is, let's get this strategy in place. Let's put a strategy in place now that, you could pivot easily. You have you'll have that data as you guys continue to scale. So you're not having to, scramble, because I get into these companies, then I'll go into a company that is, maybe 30, $50 million in annual revenue. They're starting to really scale, and they never had any type of, any strategy. And it's a lot harder to make those switches. And people will probably see this, after, just our discussion about like how many things go into it. You could imagine how hard that is. I mean, have you came into a company that, was like that, like already big, and just didn't have a process where you just had to go in and literally build out their process for them?
Yeah, definitely. Like I said, a lot of companies, they do definitely some things right, but I think they may be, missing certain areas, or missing certain aspects. I think you have to go in there and kind of take a look, like I said, and make sure there is like a process in place, and make sure there is governance in place. So yeah, I've definitely had to do that in several different companies, and I think that's really key to making sure that the company's successful and then they're profitable. So it's not that I don't think companies are not, it's not that they're not trying. I think there's just a lot of things that are important that may get overlooked, I should say, that really need to be kind of looked at and vetted, and there should be communication around it.
No, I mean, and I always say is you only know what you know, right? And I think
Right.
that I blame our industry, me. Like I blame it's, and that's why I'm so like, thank you again for doing this and jumping on because there's just so much. I mean, again, I look biased and I'm literally battling. I'm not battling, but it's like you know people need to understand in my industry, you have to bring some solutions, and there's people out there that are doing doing the same business model like I am, but I said there's just so much. There's not enough of us. I should say. It's funny as a competitor of mine reached out reached out to me today, and I love talking to my competitors. I think that's where you actually learn a lot too, right? It's not like we're sitting there talking about our deals, but he was me and him were talking. He's like, man, you talk about managed trans. He goes, I don't. Nobody in our industry is doing it, and it goes back to it's not about the. I don't think it's the company's fault. It's not the company's fault. It's our fault for not providing information or any type of value outside of a rate. Because if you have an industry like ours that's constantly always talking about rates, then everyone almost might assume it's like, well, it's a rate thing, it's a rate thing, it's a rate thing. We don't need anything else. And it's like, no, you do. So a couple more questions. I'll let you go. But RFPs, what's your take on this from, do you have, I mean, you've probably done them, right? Big RFPs, just like, what's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, you definitely need to do those to make sure you're shopping and getting the right rates, but the price alone shouldn't be what you are going after. So again, make sure that when you RFP, doing an RFP, you're understanding, who you're going after, what they can offer, how you can partner strategically with them, what's their, are they doing that with anybody else? Are they purely transactional based? So I would definitely make sure when you are doing an RFP that price is not the only factor going into it. And I will say that, I have a lot of people reaching out to me on, oh, I can get you better rates. I can get you better rates. I can get you better, people reach out on LinkedIn or email or, call or whatever it may be. So I think people kind of go, put their foot forward with that. And I've experienced over my 20 something years in supply chain. Generally when that happens and they're going off of, oh, I can get you the best rate possible, they promise a lot of things up front and then they fail to deliver because they're going after those low rates and they get you kind of get you in there and say, oh yeah, we can do this, and then either they end up having to increase the rates or they if it's like a broker, for example, they can't find the carriers to do it at that rate. Or like I said, there are quality issues or there's something else. It doesn't, again, in my experience, it's not ever, okay, I can get you the lowest rates possible and I can get you all this other stuff too. And everything's going to be fantastic. So when people kind of lead with that, it makes me take a step back a little bit versus kind of coming in as, okay, let's see how we can partner together. Yep, rates are one of those things. Happy to see how competitive we can be on that. But also let's look at this, and this. And I think that's a lot of the times when I get these sales calls, pitches, whatever you want to call on that.
Do people call you?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, call, email,
And just straight up rates.
Yes, just rates. Yes. And like I said, in my experience that it's never worked because it never ends up being what kind of was said in the beginning because things change, right? I mean, you can't promise low rates all the time. Look at what the market's done over the past year alone. I mean, it changes every day.
Yeah, I mean, it just doesn't. It's funny as to me, it's like I mean, it's a good thing for me, but it's like I don't even want to I always again, I don't want to be on a carrier list. I want to have a conversation. Like, is there any value I can bring to the table? To outside rates will come, right? I'm eventually going to have to say, hey, listen, this is our cost. But like you said,
right.
It's like I think, and again, it's just a battle we'll always have to battle on the 3PL side. Is there's bad apples in every company, every 3PL. It doesn't make us all bad, but you get in there and it's like you said, it's almost like a bait and switch. But
yeah,
what I like to say is I see when people talk about rates, I'm really I love LTL. Right? I think that you should utilize a very small carrier pool. I think going the 3PL route is the route because I think everyone talks about RFPs And that's my biggest thing is when you do RFPs, do you do RFPs the same way with truckload and LTL? Or you break those line items up and say, hey, listen, the truckload's going to be an RFP. We're going to handle that differently than our LTL, or do you just do it the same way?
There are different things that go on with LTL that don't go on with, the truckload carriers. So, people, I think people can do them either way. I mean, I've split them up before just because it's, that's kind of giving you kind of two different services, if you will. I mean, there are other things involved with LTL that aren't necessarily with truckload. So that's the way I've done it. But I think you could probably do it either way.
Is there any large companies that do RFPs? I don't want to touch the truckload, right? Maybe they do $5 million in LTL and they're utilizing, the same method, right? The RFP. Well, realistically, there's just not as many, I guess, good LTL carriers. I say there's, the top 25 LTL carriers are getting 91% of the entire volume in the country, right? So there's a very small carrier pool, right? And I always say is, you need to play it like chess, not checkers. So if you have $20,000 a month in LTL volume, you qualify, that's a bare minimum, but you qualify for CSP. LTL carriers like to work with CSP customers. It's literally, they know they get a lot more volume, right? It's guaranteed volume. They're going to know your customer more. They're going to know your freight more. Literally, you could, depending on the volume, get a drop trailer. So it's like, I see that's a huge gap. And most people, again, don't know about that, where whether you go out yourself and do it, probably, I mean, again, if you have the overhead or team, you can go out to all the carriers, the LTL carriers, and go do that. But with a 3PL, it's crazy. It's like, again, you only know what you know, but it's like 3PLs. I don't know why they don't talk about it. I'm amazed by it with the LTL. It's like, you do $1 million in LTL, you utilize all these different carriers. Let's just literally, depending on your, if it's regional, national, you only need 2, maybe 3 carriers for even like a $3 million, LTL spend. And then with CSP, that's where you really can dial in, because it's like you said, it's like accessorials, right? 9 times out of 10, let's say you need an FAK, I can get it if I'm going to give you the volume. If I give these, hey, Estes is going to give us an FAK of 85 to 250 because you're going to give them this volume. They're willing to go deeper in their pockets because you're giving them more volume. They know it's consistent, because like LTL really isn't, like I say, isn't fluctuating. Rates should not fluctuate. When I go into companies and I say, well, you used R&L last week, I'm looking at your data, you used R&L with ABC 3PL, then you used R&L direct, and then you used R&L with ABC 3PL again, same lanes, 3 different weeks, every rate was different. It's because, again, it's blanket rates. So 3PLs, we have blanket rates. All the top 3PLs, we pretty much, we all fish from the same pond, but you could tell, like the ones worth knowing, we all pretty much have the same blanket rates. And blanket rates is basically, we have a discount and we tack on margin, right? So that's what a lot of companies are, even at the level of CSP, but don't know about CSP, and they're getting blanket rates. They're literally, and that's an issue. So if CSP, I would always bring it up, especially if you have the volume, because it's the easiest way. It is the easiest way to drive down costs, and you could do a lot with it. Even like the GRI fees. LTL carriers are utilizing usually 2 GRI fees a year. CSP eliminates that. So that's right there, anywhere between 3 to like sometimes 16% cost reduction just on just even if you kept your rates neutral. So that's why that's crazy, because it's like, yeah, with this RFP thing, I think everybody is so focused on truckload. Like if you think about it, everyone's like rates, and no one's really looking at the LTL piece. Obviously, it'd be nice to like consolidate stuff, but yeah, that's interesting. I literally call people I don't even want their business. I literally call them and I'm just like, listen, I'm not really for the RFP stuff, but do you do an RFP with your truckload and LTL the same? And most people do. So it's an interesting thing. All right, well, I could do this all day, Tara. I just love talking. I love talking to someone that likes to talk about like higher level supply chain stuff. It's refreshing. And it's nice not to get hung up on sometimes. No, just kidding. But
Yeah, it's fun.
one last question I forgot. It's hold up. I do want to. What was it? Oh yeah, that was it. So obviously I'm biased. You probably worked with what you've done. I know you said we don't say any names, but you have done the one-stop shop 3PL. I'm assuming you probably you worked at other companies where you might have you didn't use one 3PL. What model do you what advantages do you see with a one-stop shop 3PL? And honestly, what disadvantages do you see? And what would you rather? What do you prefer? If you want to
honestly, I don't know if I can say which one I prefer. I think it really depends on kind of what your, what the company that you're working for, what you're moving, what kind of resources you have. I've enjoyed the 3PL because they do offer, obviously, like I said, more than just price. I mean, they work with you. They can, act as your, as your TMS. They can, help with your EDI. I mean, there's so many different things they can, work with you on other than just price. On the flip side, if you don't have a 3PL and you're kind of doing it all in house, I mean, obviously you're going to have, to expend more resources on it. You are going to have to, make sure really you're kind of keeping up with everything, so to speak. I mean, there are a lot of changes that happen. So you got to make sure people are versed in, really versed in transportation and what's happening. You've got to kind of stay on top of, you've got to be responsible, obviously, for the RFPs and for the accessorials and making sure you're staying on top of all that and that you're looking at the data. So I think, like I said, it kind of depends on, the team and the company. So I don't know if like I said, if I prefer one or the other. I've worked for companies where we've done both. But like I said, the 3PL is nice. It's just the only thing I would say with that is, you have to, be careful really not to kind of put all your eggs in one basket. If something happened, to the 3PL, you basically got everything tied into that. So there may or may not be as much of a backup plan as if you're, versus doing it yourself. But I think there's a lot to be said for somebody really kind of partnering with you and making sure that they're not only making the best choices for themselves, but also for you, which is important.
Right. And I definitely see your point. Like, and again, I don't want to be like, oh, it's 3PL model, one-stop shop is all, there's no downfall to it. It's nice to hear that, because like you say eggs in one basket, and I'm always like, my first rebuttal is like, well, you don't have your eggs in one basket. We have multiple different partnerships with carriers, but that's not exactly, if I sit back and think about it now, it's like, yeah, I mean, it is I guess you just gotta weigh the pros and cons, right? If this happened, right, what would it do? Maybe it's like, that's something that I'm actually gonna write that down, because it's like, do I have a backup plan? Can I take that objection away and say, hey, listen, I know all eggs in one basket might be a little scary, but we got a backup plan for you.
Right.
So yeah. I don't know if that's true, but that's a good one. All right, Tara, I will literally, like I said, I could bug you all day. So I appreciate you jumping on. I hope that, like, again, my goal is just to get my industry just to think about things a lot bigger, and stop beating up these poor truck drivers and start beating up their brains with knowledge and figuring out how they can drive solutions. Whether, again, if your company doesn't have the tech, you don't know how many times I've just jumped on Excel, taught myself Power BI, in the beginning of my career. So it's like, we just got to bring solutions. And I think it starts with us. I mean, we do a lot of finger pointing, and it really is, I speak for our industry. It's our industry that is not providing solutions that are outside of price. And at the end of the day, we need I think the truck drivers are what we need. We can't, yeah. I mean, I'd rather have them paid more than, anything, and take a hit. So cool.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Cool. Thank you. Oh, I was like, I thought you were thanking me for being on the podcast. I was like, what? No, thank you.
No, I just enjoy having the conversation.
Me too. But we can all go offline now. I just want to ask you a quick question.